super helpful, which I will, thank you, which I will send out later today. Now I would like to introduce Amanda Paveglio. Amanda, thank you for being here. Amanda is the manager of grant services for Lancaster-Lebanon IU13, which she says is the equivalent to our New York State BOCES. So it is an education service agency based out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I believe Amanda is still in morning time. So good morning, Amanda. She has worked there for 11 years. In her current role, she leads enterprise-wide grant activities, grants teams in developing grant proposals, and seeks out grant opportunities. She views her role as part researcher, part writer, part systems engineer, and part communications coach, which I think many of us do as well. It looks like Amanda is a person of many talents, interests, and expertise. Over the past 16 years, she has worked in the nonprofit, for-profit, higher education, and K-12 education sectors. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Music History from the College of Worcester and a Master's in Arts Management from Carnegie Mellon University. And she describes herself as an unrepentant nerd and music geek, which I love. Amanda is known throughout the grant professional circles as an enthusiastic presenter whose webinars have been highly acclaimed at national GPA conferences, as Allison mentioned. And we are so thrilled to have her here today. So I would like to turn it over to you, Amanda. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that introduction. And as I was sitting here kind of scrolling through who else is on the call, I'm like, oh, that's right. That's that part of New York. I was actually born in White Plains, it turns out, and spent the first couple of years of my life living there. My dad taught at New Rochelle High School and everything before we moved out across the rest of New York State. So I've got family all across the state. So you folks who are in upstate and Western, if there's any of you out there, I've got some stomping grounds there as well. But I've been living in Pennsylvania for most of my life, and I'm really, really pleased to be speaking with you today. So I am gonna share my screen because I don't think I'm doing that yet. There it is. This is one of those situations where I could honestly use a third monitor so that I could have like one for Zoom and then two for the presenter view. But if I could get a thumbs up that y'all are actually seeing, great. Okay, cool. So yeah, and I want to advance, please. All right, so yeah, I know everybody was muted by the host. I appreciate that. Whether you have your video on or not is optional for you. We're gonna have all things, and that there aren't gonna be polls. This is a leftover from when I did this at conference, but we're gonna use the Zoom chat for communicating things. The PDF handout, I guess that's coming afterwards. I can put it in the chat now if folks want to have that. And there will be a Q&A block at the end, but there will also be, you know, if you've got a burning question that like just can't wait, put it in the chat. If someone's keeping an eye on that, for me, that would be fantastic. They can stop me and be like, hey, we got a question. Cool, let's take it. So I'm hoping we can have some fun with all of this today. Yep, already had the introduction. I'm pretty deeply involved with the Grant Professionals Association. I just ended a term on the Grant Professionals Foundation Board. That's the fundraising arm of GPA. We help award scholarships, well, raise money and then distribute that money in scholarships to folks who want to attend conference or pursue their Grant Professionals credential. I am a fonts and graphics snob, no lie, and I'm also a sci-fi and a music nerd. Ask me anything later about anything like that. So what I hope to teach you guys about today are more practical tips for making pictures, charts, tables, things like that that you have to put into your grant applications or your reports look better and be more legible. Some specific things are listed here on the screen, like adjusting the interior margins of different things so that you can fit a little bit more text in there or make the text bigger inside your shape. Making things more contrasty, recreating a chart I'm going to tell you a story about a chart I received that was a zombie hand-me-down that nobody knew where it had come from, but we'd been using it forever, and like it needed to get redone because it was like a copy of a copy of a copy at that point. So like many of you, I'm sure I'm one of those people that I'd rather read some printed material on paper than on a screen. It sticks in my brain better if I've got that paper and that pen experience. So at one point, a couple of years ago, I'd printed off a request for proposals from one of our state agencies, and I was reading through it, and I got to the end where it said that the funds were going to be distributed among 4 different regions of Pennsylvania, and that you had to indicate on your application which region you were in so that they knew which pot of money you were hoping to tap into. And it said, please see Appendix B for a map that shows the regions and their allocation. And I'm like, okay, fine. So, I flip back to Appendix B and I see something that's basically like this. Because I'd printed this out in black and white. Trying to save that color ink, it's pricey, right? And this map was pretty unfortunate because my BOCES, the counties that I serve, are located here where the gold star shows up. And it was not apparent from the picture that I had in my hand whether I was part of the Southeast region or the Central region, because they were the same shade of gray on my page. And I was kind of like, grah, all right. So, when I pulled up the digital version of the map, it was obvious I'm in the central region, which is what I had guessed because that's what we usually are. But I had to double check. It took some extra effort, and just as a sidebar, I'm glad I don't have color deficient vision because this would have still been problematic at that point. But what it made me think about was like, we're on the grant seeking side of the equation, and a lot of us probably put up with icky gray maps and things like that come down in RFPs, and we just kind of deal with it because it's something that has to get dealt with if we want to access the money. But if I had reversed this situation, and if I had submitted this beautiful color map as part of my application, and the color was very important for communicating one of my points, and then someone had printed it out in black and white on their end and gotten this, I would have been like failing at communicating my point. And that is, I could have lost some grant points. I could have lost some credibility. I could have whiffed on completely getting the grant, maybe. So it just kind of got me thinking, like, there's a lot of things that go into our proposals that aren't words. And a lot of what we focus on is the words, making sure that we're getting every point wrung out of everything that we have to do, when we're talking about goals and objectives and data and more data and all of that. But in order to communicate some of those things, we also do have non-prose elements that go into our applications and our reports. We've got tables, we've got charts, we've got logic models, which could be a combination of pictures and tables, maps, infographics, org charts, flow charts, maybe, and all of those things are important to tell the story that we're trying to tell with our grant application. And while the funder might give you very specific formatting rules about font size and line spacing and margins, I'm here to encourage you to put a little bit of extra effort above and beyond the minimum when it comes to formatting your non-prose things, because it can really make a big difference. Most people are visual learners, at least to some degree. And if you've got a complicated idea that you're trying to get across, it might be harder for you to describe it, but easier for them to understand it if it's a picture or if it's supported by a picture than if it's just a wall of text, maybe with some bullet points in it. But a wall of text, sometimes we've all done it. Like you start to kind of glaze over after a while. You're just like, I am tired of reading this. A picture helps liven things up. And sometimes if you play your cards right, a picture can effectively free up some space on your page for text that you can use to convey a different point or support that point a little bit more and help you stay within your page count limits. But you want to make sure that your images are, oh, I should have clicked there. Only if they're reinforcing your narrative story. You don't want it to be working at cross purposes. You don't want to make your readers or your reviewers squint. Like my husband works in user design experience for software, and he's like, don't make people think about how to use the product, just let them do it. And it's the same thing. Don't make people think about, how am I supposed to look at this chart? You want to have things that come across and reinforce a professional and credible first impression. So I come to this work with 3 assumptions. Maybe it's 2. At least this one's to start with. I assume that anybody who's reading what I submit is going to be printing it off in black and white. I know that that's not always going to be the case, but I work with that assumption because not everyone can or wants to do review on screen. Maybe they're doing the data entry for scoring on screen, but they might be like me and prefer to work on paper. And not everyone has color printers. And so if they're printing, chances are good they're trying to do it in grayscale or black and white. So if you've got a table, etc., I recommend you always do a test print of that before you submit it, just to make sure it's gonna look okay. There are 3 main aspects of any of this stuff, graphics, tables, whatever, that you can work to improve on. And those are readability, contrast, and space saving. And some of the things that you do, they definitely overlap, which is why I've shown this as a Venn diagram. So some tweaks that you make can adjust one or multiple of these circles. Readability, what does that mean? That's your font size for your labels, for your data points. Hey, someone's not on mute. If someone could mute themselves, that'd be fantastic, please.
Oh, you're so sweet. No, I can do it. Is there a cup for the iced tea? Yes, you're gonna find it right.
Maybe I can do it.
Thanks so much. You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. If we all have like 12-point font that we're supposed to adhere to on a lot of these grant applications, but if you plop a picture in there and the labels are about this big, and it's like 3-point font, by the time you get it in there, like that's not going to be helping your cause. Readability can also refer to reducing graininess, making sure that what you're showing is crisp and clean, so that you don't have to okay, can I read this or not? Is it blurry? Is it my eyes? Is it not? Making sure that your text size and the graphic elements are balanced, and so you don't have like a big honkin' pie chart with teeny tiny little labels. Removing extra junk that Microsoft likes to put in there, like drop shadows. I don't know what person decided that drop shadows were a good idea, like when they decided to code that into Microsoft's fundamental programming, but like there's probably a special place somewhere for them at the end of their life. Right, moving on before I get on that soapbox any further. Contrast. This is around making sure that all of your graphics look good in grayscale and don't end up looking like that map of Pennsylvania that I showed at the beginning, where all the grays came out the same. Adding a background color to your data labels so that they pop out more. I'm going to show you how to do format data point to actually achieve that. You want to test print things so that you're not having things land in identical shades of gray. You want black, you want white, you want a gray, and maybe some kind of pattern that you can do. And there's things that you can do to make sure that text can be read over top of a pattern, like the stripes on this particular circle. And then space saving. This is tips and tricks you can do to squeeze just a little bit more graphic and text content onto your page while still staying within those page count limits. So cropping, text wrapping things around images, futzing with the line spacing a little bit. adjusting the internal margins of your table cells and the text boxes and shapes so that, again, you can make your text a little bigger inside a circle or a square, or push your text just a little bit further to the sides of that table cell, and then maybe the table doesn't have to be quite so big. So yes, the things that I use to make these tweaks and tools are things that you probably have on a computer somewhere at your disposal. So I love PowerPoint for this kind of work. It's actually really, really great for creating basic, simple images and laying stuff out. Excel has a lot of good things built into the format chart menu, and we're going to get into some of that. Word has tools that are great for table manipulation. And then this is the one with the scissors here is like a snipping tool that I use if I need to collect an image and put it somewhere else. And then paint, I guess this is what paint looks like now. The icon, I remember when it was a little artist's palette and actually looked like paint. So I don't know what that's supposed to show now. So whoops, whoa. So let's get into this a little bit. So this first example, this graphic represents a basic continuous improvement cycle, because in education, we're all about continuous improvement. I got this somewhere at work under some set of circumstances. I don't remember. Anyway, it looks okay enough, but when you translate it into grayscale, it's kind of like, nah, blah, and it might be a little bit hard to read. If folks want to chime in on the chat about some things that they might find challenging about the gray version of this diagram, I'll just shut up for a second, take a sip of water, and see if people have thoughts. Not enough contrast. The gray is too dark, low contrast, black text on gray is too dark. The font could be larger. It's boring. Deborah, you're so right. It is boring. Right, the grayscale makes the words too thin. Correct. And so what I would do is convert it to this. And the way that I would do it, I'm gonna actually exit out of this PowerPoint and show you. Trying to exit. There we go. I've got another PowerPoint file here where we can actually sandbox this, and I will zoom up just a little bit and show you step by step how I would go through recreating this into a more contrasty look. So I want to keep it the same size. I don't want to make the overall dimensions, proportions of the thing any bigger. But the first thing I want to do is, and this is all one image, like this isn't a set of components that I can break down and individually redo things in. So the first thing I got to do is make a set of things that I can actually manipulate. So I would go to the insert menu, up to shapes, and pick circle. And I'm going to start with one circle that's about the same size. And I know that it's blue. That's like the color that Microsoft wants to default it to, but I'm going to turn it black. And it doesn't really need an outline, so I'm going to make sure it has no outline. And once I make sure that's the right size, close enough. Is that close enough? Needs to be just a scotch bigger. Okay. So I'm going to do the edit text. I right-clicked on the circle to pop up this menu and edit text, and it's supposed to say set the direction. Okay. Now it's breaking the word direction already, because the internal margins of this circle are set to a number, and so the word direction is butting up against those margins, and that's what's making it break. But there's a way to fix that too, and I'm going to show you this little trick. So on the circle, when it's highlighted, if you right click on that, you get another menu, and I'm going to go down to format shape. It pops open this whole sidebar over here. Shape option. It's under text options, and you pick the little text box one. And here's where you can adjust those margins. Right here, left margin, right, top and bottom. You can, adjust them independently, but I'm going to set them all to 0. And what that means now is that text can run right up to the sides of that circle if it needs to. And that actually gives me the power now to increase the font size a little bit more. I can make it bold, and I can see, okay, 24 was too big. 20 might, we'll leave it at 20. And that's a lot more contrasty, white text on black, and bigger inside the circle than what we had before. So my next step now that I've got one that works pretty well, is I'm gonna copy this and paste 5 more of them. And that'll mean the formatting for the one that I made will stick to each of the next ones. So I'm going to make one for each of the remaining 5 circles. So I'm going to hit Control V, because that's the easy way to paste, 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 paste. 5 is paste, and one of them each here, one down here, and one here. So now I'm going to make sure all the text matches. Create a plan. I don't even think the word is necessary there. Create a plan, create plan. Let's just go with create plan. Is a junk thing at this point. Implement the plan, same thing, implement plan. And I might have to shrink the font just on a little bit on this one so that the word implement actually fits, but that's okay. Monitor plan, and spell it correctly though. Adjust course. So now we've got new circles that we can manipulate around. So I'm gonna just like overlay these over the ones that we had. You get them generally where you want to, and then you can use the arrow keys to fine tune their positions. You can see me nudging those a little bit. That's just with an up and down key. So next thing I need to do, I mean, I could just go with this, you kind of layer it all together and smush it, but then it's still got those drop shadows that are attached to the first circles, and I don't like drop shadows. I think I gave you guys a pretty strong impression of that a little bit ago. So ultimately my goal is to get rid of the thing that's behind all of this and just have the new clean version. So we need the arrows. I'm going to insert one arrow again. We've got the block arrows down here, and I'm just going to mock one up that's approximately the same shape and size. And it can stay gray, so we'll make it be gray. Doesn't have an outline. I'm going to need 6 of those, so we've got 1, copy, and Control V, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. So these then will just put into place over top of the ones that are already there, using the positions of those as a guide. And I might have a spare one here, so I can delete one. Oops, whoops, grabbed the wrong thing. Move that around. There we go. Okay, got a spare one. Got 2 more here. If I were doing this for real, I would be just a little bit more careful about the angles that I was setting these at, but for just the sake of illustration and in the interest of time, I'm gonna kind of zip all these around pretty fast. So you saw it happen a couple of times. I grabbed the image that was behind it, accidentally moved it, but now I'm gonna do it on purpose. So if I click in the middle of this and move this out to the side, and really I don't need that anymore, so I'm gonna delete it. Gone. And now we've got a more higher contrast set of elements that together show this diagram, but they're still not connected to each other as a set. So the last couple of things you need to do is click and drag over the entire thing. And there's a group menu. It's up here under the arrange. And what that's going to do now is make them all into a batch that will move around together and their relative positions will not change. So the time that we took to make sure that the circles were spaced out correctly and the arrows were spaced out correctly won't get canceled. You know, it's all one set now. And finally, once this whole set is highlighted, you can right click on that and there's a save as picture that pops up right here. You can save it wherever you like. I'm just going to call it picture 1 on my desktop. And now that picture that we just made is a thing that you can paste into a Word document, or you can paste it into something else. So this is a document I'm actually working on for my real day job, but for the sake of just illustrating that in Word, you can go to insert pictures from this device, go find the thing that you just made, which we were calling picture 1. And it comes in as a PNG file. And then you can take that, you know, scale it up, down a little bit, that kind of thing. And that's how you would embed it into a Word document or a Google Doc or whatever it is that you're working with. And so back on this.
One question, just
yes.
Laura asks, can't you just keep the old arrows? But if you could just quickly answer that, because you.
Yes, certainly. So back on where we were working, if I step back a whole lot, the old arrows are attached to the original image, which had the drop shadows on the circles. And I personally made the choice, I didn't want those drop shadows there anymore because they were just kind of like fluffy visual junk and I'm snobby like that. So in order to have arrows and not drop shadows, I have to get rid of the original image that's living behind this. I can't like extract the old arrows from the diagram that includes the drop shadows, which is why I gave it new arrows that were basically identical. Personal preference, but that's why I approached it that way. If you were perfectly fine with those drop shadows still being there, you know, you could have just gotten rid of all of these arrows, of which, gosh, there's a lot of them, and just grouped these new circles over top of the original image. Whoops. And now that's all a set with the original arrows, the new circles, and the drop shadows if you're okay with those. Does that make sense? What is a drop shadow? I'm going to zoom in on this real far. So a drop shadow is a thing that's supposed to make a 2-dimensional thing look like a 3-dimensional thing. So yeah, I see Allison Paul has noted they're the smudging gray shadow on the right side. That's this stuff right here. So you've got your main object, and then, oh, let's make it look 3D because that'll be fun. Not really useful, but fun, right? So they add that, and it looks like it's floating over the page or like it's popping up off of the page, that kind of thing. Lydia, can you comment on using PowerPoint versus Publisher, which seems to be able to do the same thing? Yes, Publisher can do the same thing. That is more designed or intended for desktop publishing things. A lot of these tools are the same in both. I've found over the years that not everybody has Publisher. Some places, some people that I work with at my agency don't have Publisher, or they don't realize that they have Publisher. And so I have come personally to assume that people don't have Publisher because it's not universal, but PowerPoint usually is. So that's why I'm using this as my default tool for recreating these things, because it's a tool that probably everybody has. If you've got Publisher and you are so comfortable using Publisher to accomplish this same set of tasks, by all means, you've probably got the ability to like micro fine tune stuff just a little bit more too. But that's why I would be using PowerPoint for this, is because as I'm going through these steps, more people should be able to access this set of tools. Okay. Right. So just to kind of put a bow on this one, here's our before and after. You can see it shows the same content side by side, but the one on the right achieves more readability, higher contrast, and then depending on how we would embed it into our Word document or whatever with text wrapping and stuff, we could work on space saving. Next example. So here's a pie chart somebody handed it to me a couple years ago, and we work with a lot of adult education and other types of education in my agency. So this was meant to represent the percentage of client base that each of these different groups of learners comprise in a given year at our BOCES. It's not bad, again, but I think there are some things that could be improved, and I'd like to get some feedback from the group on what you don't like about this. See if you can predict what I'm going to want to change. Small fonts. The key is hard to read. Yep. Okay, I will also point out that, oh gosh, okay, so what I've done in my slides here is I've actually done them before and after next to each other. The gray, the red, and the darker blue also turn into hauntingly similar shades of gray. Well, the red is black, but like these two are kind of the same. Like, it's not contrasty enough, in my opinion. And yeah, the key is too short, and you don't actually know the amounts, the values of the pi values. So if having those data points is important for the story that you want to tell, like, they're just completely missing. So this is one that I recreated in Excel. So we're going to go there next. I showed you doing one of these in PowerPoint just as a graphics design tool. Now we're going to go into Excel. So if you're using actual data and the chart tools in Excel, a lot of the things are similar, but there's a few more tweaks that we can have. So get a blank workbook started here, and I should have prepped this ahead of time and didn't. So my apologies. Do this on my other screen real quick. So we've got early learners and K-12 learners and adult learners and educators, admins, and there's a rough percentage for each of those. I'll go D2, 7, and something that adds up to 100, because pie charts have to equal it to 100. Okay, 6, sure. All right. We'll pretend that this is your data set for those same things. So I've got, and I'll zoom this up because I'm sure this is pretty small on your screens. I'll end up zooming back down again. So the first thing you want to do is highlight your text and insert a chart. And there's recommended charts. This is all up here, where you pick your chart type. We're going for a pie chart. So there's a pie chart. It gives you some options already, like, do you want 2D? Do you want 3D? Never pick 3D. Again, why is 3D even important? So we're going to go with 2D. This is more or less the proportions on what was on the other one. It's given it different default colors, stuff like that. But if I wanted to make this, adjust the position and the size of the key, give it a different title, give it those data labels, adjust the colors, all of those things exist. So your chart title, you can certainly type the text, and I'm trying to remember what this was meant to be, percentage of client base. But if you have highlighted the home menu up here at the top, you can format this text just like you would in Microsoft Word. So you can change the font, and it's in exactly the same place. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, you can make it actual black instead of whatever weird shade of gray it defaulted to. You can make it bold, italic, all of that kind of stuff. So that's a way that you can make it a little bit more readable. Same with the key at the bottom, the legend. If you click on that so that it is highlighted the entire thing, you can adjust that font as well. So you can scale it up. You can see it starts to jank other things around on the screen a little bit, but you can make that font bigger. I get twitchy if fonts don't match, so I made this one Arial. The other one needs to be Arial as well. That's a little bit better, at least. The font is easier to read. There's all this weird white space on the sides though, and if I was to plop this into a Word document just as is, that would be eating up a lot of space. So I'm gonna go to, well, first things first, if you click inside the rectangle, you get the little sizing handles. I'm just gonna grab one and try to make this a little bit skinnier. And now it's more square, it's less of a big wide rectangle with white space on the sides that's not necessary. In terms of changing the colors of the pie wedges, each of these wedges is considered a data point. That's like the technical term for it. If you've got a bar chart, each of the bars is a data point. If you've got a line graph, each of the points that defines that line is considered a data point. So there's a thing in Excel called edit data point. So I'm going to click into the pie, all the wedges get highlighted at once. Hopefully you can see that. If I click on the one again, now just this blue one is highlighted. You can see the little blue handles right here. I'm going to right click on it then, and there's a format data point menu that shows up. And this operates very much like what we were seeing in PowerPoint a few minutes ago, where you can change, use the paint bucket, and you can change the fill color to solid, to no fill, to a texture, to a pattern, whatever you like. I'm just going to make this one straight up black. Boom. That's about as high contrast as you can get. We've got a black, we've got a gray. I want to have a white one because black and white contrast pretty well. So I'm going to click onto this orange one. I'm picking that arbitrarily. No, I'm going to pick the yellow one just because, and I'm going to make that one white. Although now it looks like a big blank empty space because there's no line around it, but that's okay because you can adjust the border color as well and give it a solid line that's black. Although that's the only one that appears to have a line because, if I click off of that now, like it's a little fat up here and none of the rest of them have a line. So I'm going to give them all a line just to make that visually look a little bit better. And you can adjust the thickness of the line. If it's too thick, there's a width right here. So we just want it to be defining. We don't want it to be like huge and fat and bulky. So we've got black, we've got white, we've got gray. What do we do about this orange one? We could go with a lighter shade of gray. We can't really go with a lighter shade of black because that's gray. And we can't really go with a lighter shade of white or a darker shade of white, but we can go with a pattern. And what's a pattern, I hear you asking? Well, back up in the fill border, they have this thing called pattern fill. And this is where you can make it be stripy, or you can make it be polka dotty, or something that's got a little bit of texture to it, but it's just in 2 colors. So it's not like a wood grain or a grass blowing inside that or anything like that. What's a picture or texture fill? Picture fill is if I wanted to, for some reason, make the wedge be filled with my company's logo, because that could be interesting, I could insert a picture from some file and I'll just do this for fun. I've got my, I'll put my face in there. That'll be fun. So I've got my batch of headshots. There we go. That's a picture fill. Yeah, texture fill is they give you a menu of things that look like canvas or wood grain or granite countertop, what have you. Those can work too, but it's blurry. I don't love this at all. And so I would advocate for pattern fill all day long. And you can make it fine grain stripes, fat stripes, polka dots. There's a bunch of these different things. I'm gonna go with this stripy thing here. A little hard on the eyes, the blue on white, but that's okay. You can change the colors of the pattern, and there's a little bucket tool for each one. So I'm gonna make the foreground like a really dark gray, and the background a really, really light gray, just to make it a little bit easier, like less vibrating on our retinas. So in this way, it's very easy to see which wedge is which in black and white and grayscale. Excuse me. So the other thing that we talked about is labels. And there is a way to add labels here. I'm right-clicking on the map, and there is a thing right here. It says add data labels. Change the size of things, and those come in with a default font and color and font size and font style. But you can change that too. So I don't know why it made it smaller for starters. So we'll put that back up where it ought to be. So in order to change your font style, you can do them one at a time, or you can do them in a batch. If you click on one, all of them get highlighted. And so first of all, I'm going to make them bold, just to make them a little bit bigger. I'm going to make them bigger and the same font as the other things I'm using. This works pretty well for our white and for our gray one. The stripy one and the black one, not so much at all, but this one will be easy to fix. I'm just going to click on it twice so that this is the only one that's highlighted, and I'm going to change this font color to white. Okay, this one, whether it's white or whether it's black, pretty hard to see. So what we're going to do is I'm going to, there's a label options up here, and the number 27 that's showing there is a data label that's a shape with text inside it. And you can change the background color of the shape separately from the background, from the color of the text. So I am going to just give that whole label a fill of white, like that, or maybe gray to match the background of color of the actual rectangle. So now it's floating in a rectangle of white, gray, sorry, over top of that wedge, so that the 27 actually becomes legible. And then, if you want to make these even bigger, you can scale all of these up a little bit more so that they're like super big, like that. So that ends up being a much more, I think, legible and understandable way to approach a pie chart. And then for this, you can right-click on the whole thing, save it as a picture, as we did before with that circular flow chart. We'll have to call it something else, otherwise my computer will yell at me. And then insert that into a Word document just the same way as we did before. Desktop, picture 2. Now what this does now is inside your Word document, it's a static image. So if your data changes, you got to go back into Excel. Like you can't change the data on the fly of this. So that's just one kind of caveat. So keep that in mind. Can you add a percentage to the text boxes? Laura, yes, absolutely, you can do that. I think that might actually be something that gets achieved in the data itself. Oh dear. If you format your data correctly, and of course, as I change this, these change accordingly, but we're getting there. Okay, the overall size of the pie changed a little bit, but you can move these around. This font size might be a little big now if we're including a percentage symbol, but you get the idea. We're micro tweaking at that point. If you have, John asks, if you have more than 4 wedges in the pie chart and you're using grayscale, would you use different pattern fills to create the contrast? Yes, absolutely, John. So if we had a 5th row like this, other, and I'm going to subtract out of, make this be 10 and this becomes 5% just for the math. You could just format any additional wedges the same way. Picture or texture, pattern. I'll make this one be polka dotty, and I'm gonna give it a, I don't know, figure it out. But that's, yes, that's how you would do that. I'd also recommend not having the pattern fills next to each other if you can avoid that. So if you've got a solid pattern kind of going around, it'll keep the patterns from like visually fighting with each other along the line that they share. So there's other things inside your format data point menu that you can use. I would encourage you to just kind of go in there and like play around a little bit in all the copious amounts of free time that I know you all have. If you wanted to, like, you know, explode these for some reason, there's a way to do that, like pop one out. You know, if you wanted to, yeah, there's things that you can do. And then whatever final product you end up with, you can save it as a picture and plop it into your thing. I see we're already rapidly approaching 1 o'clock. Are we on till 1:15, and do I have almost all of that remaining time? Okay. So yes. So here's how, you know, it's also possible to change the position of your legend. So that's the name of the key at the bottom. It's called a legend. If you click on that, a thing over here comes down for legend options, and you can toggle the position. Do you want it top, bottom, left, right, top, right? So if you wanted it off to the side, and then have the pie next to it, because you needed to have an image that was wider than it was tall to put into your document, because that's the way that the space is working out. You know, you could certainly adjust things around. Don't make me a liar. There we go. You know, like this. And now you've got a way to, trying very hard, there we are, have that larger legend off to the side instead of at the bottom. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this before I move on to some tricks that I have found with tables in Microsoft Word? Okay, and we're going to keep rolling here. Oh, I was going to tell you a story about a bar chart that I received as part of a grant application that was handed down to me when I was just a wet behind the ears new grant writer. And they were like, we need to reapply for this funding, and we're basically going to recycle the old application and just make some updates and stuff. And here's a chart. And the chart looked like that. And it was a very critical part of making an argument about how we needed to have more middle skilled jobs training programs in Pennsylvania, particularly in our neighborhood, because of this gap. Okay. And I looked at this and I went, oh my God, like, where's the original of this? Because those labels are so grainy. It's like someone made a photocopy of a photocopy of a JPEG of a photocopy. Like they're barely legible when you actually get them onto the printed page, and it's like this big, right? There's a couple of missing vertical lines on the 30 and 40%. And all of these are a different shade of gray, and nobody could tell me why that was. Like if we're talking about jobs versus workers, I could see 2 different shades of gray maybe. Or if we're talking about high skill, middle skill, and low skill, I could see 3 shades of gray, but 6 shades of gray seemed bonkers. And I said, who's got the original that we can like update this in Excel? And everyone was like, they don't work here anymore, I guess. We don't know where this came from. Okay, so I ended up just recreating this as a picture. I'm like, I don't care about the data. This is basically a series of rectangles, text boxes, and lines. And I didn't have to do anything about the text up here, like the text at the top and the bottom with the sources and everything. That was all clear and fine. But is this the cheated one that I ended up making? No. Again, I went into PowerPoint, and do I have this one in my sandbox? I know I've got this somewhere. I'm sorry. I swear to God, I prepared for this. It's just I've done this different versions of different places, and so some of my sandbox materials, like I forgot to reset them before the next one, things and stuff. Insert text boxes. First of all, to clean up some of these labels. So high skill jobs. Gotta change that font because I don't even know what that font is called, but it's strange. Rockwell. Nope, let's make it be boring old Arial, but it gets the job done. And I'm gonna set it to the right so that it's close to that bar. And then I need to set the background color of that text box to be white so that it lays over and hides the label that it's replacing. And if Zoom wasn't being clever, there it is. It's under shape format, shape fill, white. So now we've got a cleaner label that we can butt up against that bar. And I could, rubber stamp that out and make the additional ones. Each of these bars is a rectangle. So there's not the only good reason to recreate the bars here is because it's the only way to change the color of them so that the colors are made consistent from one set to the next. The same way someone may have asked, is there a way to show a big gap between middle skill workers and jobs? Laura, do you mean changing the scale of the chart itself so that the difference between this bar and this bar is greater? Or do you mean actually showing like a visual gap more between this bar and this bar this way? I just want to understand your question. I'm guessing it's probably the difference that exists here.
Laura, unmute and ask your question.
Yeah. Go ahead. You can't off mute. Okay, I'm gonna guess, Laura, that what you're asking about is the difference between this bar and the relative length. Yeah, you could change the scale of the bottom of this a little bit, but that wasn't my goal when I was doing this. I just wanted to make a less grainy, icky looking version of this same exact thing. It would be easier to recreate the entire chart, except I didn't know what the actual values of the bars were. And so I would have been guessing, and nobody could tell me, like, I guess I could have gone back and found this data source. But this was something that, like, the grant was due in 2 days. I had 900 other things to do, and trying to track down a data source that someone else should have had and didn't was like not something that I really had a lot of bandwidth to do. And so recreating the entire chart in Excel, yes, that would have been preferable. I think this was more of a Band-Aid approach that I was trying to take, and it wasn't. It was going to solve my goal, but not actually solve my problem, if that makes any kind of sense. So I do want to move on. Actually, there's a thing I want to show you in Microsoft Word with tables. And I know we have to use a lot of tables for all sorts of things. You know, whether it's logic models or personnel lists or lists of this, lists of that, lists of the other. And I want to find one actually that okay, come here, you. So this is based on a table that we had for an actual grant. We provide citizenship instruction in our area, and we had to show people that were going to be funded by the grant, what were their qualifications, how much of an FTE of each of them was charged to the grant, what was their relevant experience, training, qualifications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the tables, it was stated, because this is a federal grant and they love to do this, all the tables had to be double spaced, 12-point font, just like the rest of the narrative. And so someone handed me a table that basically looked like this, where there was a bunch of columns that were all really, really long and really, really skinny because it needed to fit in a portrait size page, but the text was just bonkers. And so things were breaking like this. And if, you know, the word coordinator, like, I guess we could hyphenate that. But it was painful to read. And it was taking up a ridiculous amount of vertical space, and we were page count limited. So like we had 50 pages and this table itself was taking up 5 of them, you know, like that's a lot. So I'm like, okay, within the restrictions the feds are putting on what we do with this table, there are probably some things that we can do to adjust that'll make it a little bit easier to read and understand, maybe shorten the height of the table a little bit. So, because it was going on and on and on and on forever like this. So the way that I ended up changing it was, these are our original columns. There were 6 of them. I ended up merging some things to make some cells wider, like this. This is actually 2 columns wide right here. And this is 2 columns wide right here. And this is 4 columns wide, and this is 2. But with these different headings, it was communicating the same amount of information, but it wasn't so vertical. It was a little bit more horizontal, but it was still within the shape that fit on a portrait size page. This took some experimentation to try to see like how it was going to go, like, oh, if we put this here and put that there. And then once we had this finished for each person, I would put a really...
Thanks, I'm watching a webinar.
Hey, someone's not
Okay,
muted.
I felt a little better, like I went for coffee with Jared and then like I went to the bathroom. And that helped.
dear.
Like I felt better. I'm not saying, I definitely feel better.
Please unmute
Okay,
yourself.
whoever is not on mute needs to be on mute right now, please.
Maddie Shearing, you need to mute. Thank you.
Oh my God, so embarrassed, sorry. I was kicked off earlier.
That's happened to all of us. I got called out for doing baby talk at my cat one time on a webinar, and there was no camera, so people didn't know I was talking to my cat. They thought I was like, you know, entertaining somebody. It was awkward on a lot of levels. So anyway, there's a way to format the bottom row of one of these cells so that it's got, sorry, that threw me off a little bit, so that the bottom row is thicker. You can make it really, really fat just on the bottom, so that like that can happen. And then the next person, oh, let's see, I canceled out the side ones. Go back to that. There's a borders and shading menu that drops down where you can adjust the actual borders and shading individually for any table cell. And so for Jim Smith, we had this, I would set up the same thing for the next person, run the same set of cells, but just change the, change this information for each person and kind of repeat. And so I ended up taking a table that was 5 pages tall down to like 2.5, which I thought was a major win, because, every page counts. The other thing I want to share is just the same way that you can adjust the text, the margins, the interior margins of a shape in PowerPoint or Excel, etc. You can adjust the interior margins of a table cell in here. So if you had the, yes, I will show you how to merge cells, but before I lose this thought, I want to show how to adjust interior margins of table cells. So when you are working in a table, there are 2 additional menus that show up. One is called table design and the other one's called layout. Underneath your layout menu, there's a button here called cell margins. And if you highlight 1 or more cells, I'm going to do it for 4 at the moment, and click on that, you can adjust the top, bottom, left, and right margins of your cells. So if for some reason I really needed to squish more text top to bottom, I could set the default cell margins top and bottom to 0 so that we can get right up against that table border. I still like to keep a little bit left to right just so things don't crash into the walls and then people are like, oh, that looks ugly. But it's just a toggle up and down, and it's like a micro adjustment that you can make that can make a little bit of difference. I'll set these to 3, and you can just see like it's a little bit different from over here. Not a ton, but a little bit. Laura, if it's for a federal grant, is it risky to play with the format? Yes. So this is a calculated risk, but what they really don't want you to do is change font sizes or line spacing. We are changing things that allow for more lines to maybe fit at the same spacing rate, if that makes a kind of sense. I don't think anybody's going to be getting out a ruler and checking our interior table margins.
Have you ever received any pushback? I'm just curious because it's very clever.
I have not. I have not actually received pushback on that. So again, it's a calculated risk, but if you're down to, if you've got half a page left to, like, you got to shrink this thing by half a page and it's already so tight it squeaks, like this is the type of thing I start resorting to just a little bit. Someone asked, can you show how to merge cells? Laura Sanzel, yes, of course. So again, we're in the table layout menu. So you've got buttons for insert row, insert column, insert this. There are buttons right here for merge cells and split cells. So if you wanted to merge 2 cells together, you highlight both of them and then click merge. You can do this, any number of ways. If you want to highlight a whole bunch of them, a whole column's worth for some reason, you can do that way. That it's as simple as that. And then, text will wrap inside this cell, but it, if you change the height of one of the cells on that row, it'll change the height of all the things that are merged along with it. You can also then split 2 cells that you've merged by highlighting the merged cell and then just hitting split, and it'll ask you, do you want to put it back to 2 columns in one row? Do you want to make it 3 columns for some reason? Sure, okay, well now we're doing that. If this one, for some reason, I wanted to split the cells and make it be 1 column as it stands, but 2 rows, there's a way to do that. So you can kind of set up a basic table and then start playing around with where things lay within that table. Once you get a kind of a format that works for the information you're trying to show and it fits within the parameters of the page you're trying to fit it on and it doesn't hurt to look at, save that, and then you can kind of like duplicate those rows down, and the if I do this and go insert below, I think it might give me 4. Nah, it doesn't do that. Okay, not quite smart enough for that. I was hoping it would give me 4 identical rows, even with the merging and stuff. It doesn't. So this gets a little tedious, but it can be strategically a thing to use. That can save you some grief and headaches later on. Especially if you're being asked to put a lot of text into a table that can become very tall very quickly. All right, in the interest of time, I would like to stop there just because we're approaching 1:15. But there have been very good questions come through at this point. If there are any additional ones, I'd be happy to touch on those now. I will say a lot of the button clicks, and this is this, and this is in that place, and that is in that place, is in the handout that you're going to be getting. So that's all for Microsoft Office. But if you have a Mac, like I have a Mac that I use for personal use, a lot of those tools are roughly in the same places where they're described in the handout. So look for that a little bit later. Is there any way to import charts, graphs into an online application? Yeah, so if we use a lot of Google Drive for collaborative work, especially because everything I do is collaborative, remote worker-y kinds of things. I'll go jank up one of my own documents so people won't give me grief about it later. So this is Google Doc, and I'm waiting for the whole thing to load so I can actually go down to the real bottom of this. And all right. Google Docs also has an insert menu where you can insert an image, upload from computer. So if you've saved something on your own hard drive and you want to import it that way, that's the easiest way to do it. If you've created a image somewhere and you want to put it online and then bring in a link, you can, search the web or bring it in by URL. There's also a way to have a Google Doc and a Google Sheet, which is the spreadsheet version of Google, talk to each other. So if you've got a chart in your Word document and you make changes to the data on the spreadsheet side of it, it automatically updates the chart on, there's ways to do that. It might get a little bit long to discuss some of that in the time that's left. So if that's something that you wanted to explore, I would invite you to contact me. My contact information is on the handout and also right here. Deborah wants to know, do you know of any good tutorials on general word formatting? Drives me crazy. Oh my God, I know. All of this stuff that I have learned is stuff that I've kind of learned by doing out of necessity over the years. And yeah, like just like when you think you've learned something, they go and change a version and then like everything's off the rails again. Like all bets are off now because now we're defaulting to green and yellow instead of orange and gray or whatever. I don't know any good tutorials on general word formatting that exist right now. But that's mostly because I haven't gone and looked for them. I'm sure that they do exist out there. I think there's actually, is it called LinkedIn Learning? It used to be lynda.com, Lynda, and then that got bought by LinkedIn, and now they call it like LinkedIn University or LinkedIn Learning or LinkedIn something like that, where there's free or very cheap webinars and trainings that you can take on stuff. There's a gajillion YouTube videos out there in the world on how to do specific things. And there's probably some series of those that you could find. I do not know, I can't comment on the quality or lack thereof of what's out there. I mean, there's going to be a range, but if there's a specific task that you're trying to do, I've been known to just Google, how do I da 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 da. 500 videos come back and I you know, check out the top 5 or something and see what I can learn. So yeah, that would be my advice on that, just off the cuff. Okay. How we doing, Michelle?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we still have most of the people who signed up at the beginning still here, so I think we're engaged. So I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you to
You're
everyone
welcome.
who joined us. Amanda, we're thrilled to have you. I know we really wanted you last year, and we were able to get you this year, so I really appreciate you working with us. For anyone who is interested, I will be sharing Amanda's handout and slides this afternoon, and the webinar was recorded, so that will go out sometime next week likely. Please do consider joining us for our next program on May 19th, and I put the link to register in the chat just now. Thank you all for joining us. Amanda, thank you so much again. Have a great day, everyone, and I hope to see you all on our connections call next Wednesday morning, 9:30? Am I right?
Yes.
I think I'm right. April 6th, next Wednesday, 9:30. I love the connections calls. So thank you all. I can stay on for a few minutes. I know that some people do have to jump off. So thank you again for joining us.